Welcome into AZ Audibles. I'm Jordan Ham alongside Eric Sorensen and Devin Henry. Guys, we're in the thick of the offseason now, turning the page to the 2019 season. But we saw some news from the New York Times over in New Jersey. They're restricting full contact practices within the season from 90 minutes down to 15 minutes. The numbers have been declining within the state, as it seems, across the country. And they think that that can kind of help counteract because of the concerns of player safety. Eric, what are your thoughts on this?
I don't know if less contact will equal more kids coming out to play football. Last year I did a story on Paradise Valley. The Trojans have over 2,000 students at their high school. Only 22 of them came out to play varsity football, which I think is astonishing. I don't really also know how coaches are going to deal with less numbers. It's a situation that I only think is going to get worse before it gets better. In terms of the contact rule that could make its way out to Arizona, I think coaches and teams would also benefit from seeing more super scrimmages like we saw at the end of last summer. Hagley hosted Saguaro, Hamilton, as well as Queen Creek, and it was really productive. And instead of just hitting your own guys, it's good to see live action against good competition.
And I think with tackling, what's the old saying? Practice makes perfect. Like, I understand the urge to go ahead and try to limit as much contact as possible, but they need to be able to build that in somewhere, because even going to ASU, you hear Danny Gonzalez talk about some of his defensive backs, and he's like, they don't know how to tackle.
Right.
They're bringing in a rugby trainer and coach to teach them how to properly tackle. So I think it comes down to the technique, and of course, yes, you want to try to limit the contact, and I think that the good teams are already starting to do that. It's really, trying to keep your guys fresh for Friday nights and make sure that when the lights are on, everyone's fully healthy, everyone's ready to go, but you still need to build that in to make sure that guys are properly able to do that and do it in real time, because that's one of the things that's really hard to recreate in a practice, half-speed setting. When you're going during a game and you're amped up, you want to go, as fast as you can and try to make some plays, you need to have that environment. So I don't know what the right number or the right amount of time for that is, but I feel like that needs to be built into the practices, especially in season, as you're trying to get your feet under you while the season's going on.
And I also think, following up on that, Jordan, coaches will tell you a lot of guys get injured going half speed.
Yeah.
Sometimes these injuries happen a lot less in game-type situations when you're playing against good competition.
And obviously this is all for safety, primarily the head, keeping the head safe for especially young student athletes as they move on into their college career and into adulthood, really. And this is something that football is trying to change from the top down. In the NFL, the primary complaint of all the rule changes recently, trying to protect the head and neck area of the body, has been defenders can't figure out how to tackle anymore because the old ways don't work. You have to find a new way to tackle. And I think if we look at this, we can spin this in a very positive way for high school athletics across the nation. If we start young, go down to the high schoolers and reteach them, instead of leading with the head, teach them how to rugby tackle like rugby coaches are doing at ASU, as you mentioned, Jordan, then maybe in a few years we don't longer have this problem in the NFL where we see all these head-to-head contact injuries and head-to-head attacks going on in the NFL and college football, whether it be intentionally or not, because this is how defenders have been trained to tackle since they're in high school. Pop Warner. So I think that we can take this positively because change is inevitable. It's going to come because there's so much concern over safety to a young kid's head and what that can mean for them later in the future. The law in New Jersey states full contact as tackling and taking someone to the ground. So there can still be contact as in pushing, shoving, grabbing, or maybe even leading with that shoulder if we can teach how to tackle that way instead of going in with the head and snapping them down to the ground.
And a good point, on the concussion debate is, so many of these NFL players are saying, I only had a couple in my pro career, but you can't really quantify what's happening in the Pop Warners, in the high schools, counting how many times you see stars or your bell gets rung or, whatever the term may be. You don't know how many times that has happened to a young brain, a young developing brain. Certainly an interesting and bold new rule that's coming in for New Jersey. We'll see if it makes its way out west here in Arizona. For any high school football storyline, make sure to keep it here to AZ Audibles on Sports 360 AZ each and every week.